So in this video, I'm going to show you the proper way to do a proper directional round brush blow dry. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to towel dry the hair just a little bit. Okay. So before we start actually blowing out the hair, I've squeezed out the water, so we're good there. Now I'm going to build a proper foundation in the hair with hair product. So I have the hair product on my hands. I'm going to go ahead and run it through the hair. Depending on what kind of product it is, I'm either going to focus on putting it through the scalp or the mids and ends. So there's a little bit of a myth that whenever you're blow drying hair, that you're evaporating the water out of the hair. That's really not what you're doing. What you're really doing is pushing that water down the hair strand off the hair. Oftentimes, if you're really looking, you can see it like flake on the ground as you're blow drying it out. I mean, to a minute extent, you're probably evaporating it a little bit, but the majority of what you're doing is pushing it down. Where do you like to cut your hair?
I have a natural part on this side.
Okay, so I determined where her part is, and I've brushed her bangs in the direction that I want them to be whenever we're done. She really doesn't have tangly hair. Her hair comes through really easy, but oftentimes you can use a wet brush, and it really comes off the hair really nicely. Even people who have a lot of tangle in their hair will come out easily with a wet brush. So always be mindful as well what kind of earrings your client has on. If they have on hoops, I usually have them take their earrings out because it's big enough for my fingers to get into. But if it's any kind of a stud, that should be okay. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start my blow dry is I'm going to what I call rough drying the hair. And it's still a directional blow dry, but we are going to blow dry it without any tools other than our hands. But we are going to do it with a bit of purpose. I'm always going to be blowing the way the hair grows, so we're going to be still blowing down the hair strand, not up the hair strand. And then I'm going to use the curvature of her head as if her head was a big round brush. And this is especially important if you're blow drying short haired clients. This really gives you a really nice tuck in the neckline when you're blow drying. So this is the same concept of having, the clients or people a lot of times at home will blow dry their hair upside down. And this is kind of like the same concept. We're blowing up and over the head. And we're using that round of the head to start creating body. Once I blow dry that direction for a moment, I'm going to turn the client around and I'm going to blow it the other direction. And so by crisscrossing, going from one direction to the other, using the round of the head, that gives us the same concept as if you were blowing your head upside down to give you the volume that you're looking for. But at all times, I'm always blowing down the hair strand, never against it, and blowing away from the client's face. So we'll demonstrate that. So in general, what I'm looking for, especially in the crown and the back of the head, I'm looking for about 70% dry. I still want a little bit of moisture in it so that I can get the proper curl or flip or smoothness that I'm looking for in my actual round brush. But by drying this 70% before I even pull out my brush, that is going to greatly reduce the time that I'm spending with the brush. So I really am not concerned at all about the sides of her head. Those can actually stay 50-60% wet because what will happen is I start to blow dry the back of her head. By the time I get up here to do the sides, they will have naturally dried to about 70%. And on somebody with curly hair in particular, I've noticed that if I pre-dry these to 70% before I start, they're too dry before I actually get to them. So it's okay if the two sides are a little bit more damp as long as the back is 70% dry. You can already see just from that has straightened them and is getting them really close to kind of how I want them to lay in my pre-blow dry. Okay, so now I'm going to part the hair off. I use what I call a headband sectioning. So basically everything, if you are wearing a headband, everything that's in front of that headband will be going forward. and then everything behind the headband is coming back. Oftentimes, I don't even need to clip these out of the way, so that saves you a little bit more time. So then I'm going to come and right at that occipital bone, we're going to split that. And generally, you can do the entire nape section from the occipital down, like as your first section of blow drying. So you typically can divide the head on most people in about 3, sometimes 4 sections. So on her, it'll be 3. So 1, 2, and then 3. So everyone does it different. I'm right-handed. I like to put the tool, which is the blow dryer, in my dominant hand. Then I'll put the brush in my less dominant hand. And then I also use my pinky a lot in this, and everybody kind of does this different. This is just kind of how I do it. But I use my pinky so that when I flip the hair, or when I reposition the hair, I can tell how dry the hair is. Okay, so we're actually doing a couple of things here. For one, we're directionally blow drying, meaning that my air is flowing the same direction as my hair. So almost parallel. So, because if I blow it this way, for one, I'm blowing air right back at her and I'm making a frizzy mess. And for two, this is really hot air. And so I don't want it perpendicular going back towards her, because for one, this blow, I don't want the air, hold on.
Rip up the cuticle.
Blah, 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 blah. So I don't also want to go straight into the hair, more perpendicular, because if I do that, I'm still directing the air towards her neck, which is really hot air. And for two, even going this direction, I am still going to be roughing up the cuticle, kind of blowing backwards. So I want to tuck the brush up at the root, and then as much as I can, I'm wanting to be parallel to the hair and blowing straight down the hair shaft. And a lot of times I'm just coming straight through. I'm not working my brush yet because the hair was still pretty wet. So I'm just working straight through, and then when I get to the ends, I can start working my brush a little bit, focusing on my ends, and I just continue to do that. And then where people really sometimes I feel like overwork themselves is, man, they're just working that hair and they're going quick. And really, you don't have to do that. You really can work slow and steady. As long as you're moving, you're not going to burn the client. I'm directing the air away from her, so she's not going to get burnt, and I can work slowly down that hair strand until the hair is dry. Often I'll reposition with my pinky, and I can kind of tell how dry we're getting. Once I feel like I'm 100% dry, I can concentrate on those ends for just a moment, take my air away, or use the cool shot, let the brush rest in the hair for a moment. When you let the brush rest in the hair, it's going to set whatever kind of a curl you're wanting to put in it. Once I do that for a moment, I'm going to release, and I end up with a little curl. So it kind of just depends on the look that I'm going for, but that's kind of your standard round brush kind of a look that you're going for. So lots of smoothness. Whenever we get done, I'm not going to have to get a flat iron or a curling iron out. She's going to be ready to go just as soon as we're done with the blowout, which is kind of what we're wanting. Okay, so we've done all the bottom, and now we're into the crown area. So I'm going to split this into a couple of sections and do the crown, but I'm going to also switch my body position at the same time. So I'm going to split this however we're going to split it. I think I'm going to do one big section and one small section. So instead of doing the same body position that I was doing, which is this one, see, I'm kind of getting up here into the crown. I could lower her down, but once I have blown all of this, my body's also ready for a little bit of a change in position. So from this point, I flip around to the side of my client, and I tuck the brush under, and I blow from the top instead of doing this direction that I was. This is just so much more comfortable. But the same directions still apply. I'm still blowing parallel down the hair shaft, blowing with the hair, smoothing the cuticle down, so on and so forth. It's just the only thing that really changed was my body position. And then release. I'm going to do the same thing over here, and then I'll show you how to address this a little bit. I've blown the entire back. Now I'm going to blow the top. I'm going to take her part, and I'm going to split the difference. So I'm going to kind of split the hair almost like in a mohawk section, where her part is in the middle of this. I'm going to section this mohawk section out of the way. And I want to blow my sides. And also, don't be afraid when using a concentrator. I'm actually putting pressure between the concentrator and the brush to create that little bit of tension that I'm looking for. Okay, so now I have them both sides. We still have this top section and the bang. So the reason I did the mohawk section this way is because I'm wanting to create volume in the hair. So every woman, even people who have a ton of hair and a natural volume, they still want volume. So what this does is instead of blowing this flat against this part line, I'm blowing against it, and we're gonna blow this back. And then it can just split and fall where it wants to, but we're going to create body in there because we're blowing this on base instead of with the part. So I'm going to take this mohawk section and I'm going to split it, and then this is going to be my first section that I'm going to blow dry first, and then I might split this into two sections, we'll see. And then by doing that on base, we're going to create that volume in there that we're looking for. And that naturally creates a little bit of body in there versus just laying it flat up against it. So I'm going to take the bangs and I'm going to group them together. I'm going to put my brush under here, lay the bangs on top, and then I'm going to directionally blow dry them. I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to come up here, get them under there again. So now I'm just going to come through and I'm just going to finger my way through her style. I can just brush it out, creating that volume in there, just placing it around the face like I want it to be. What do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
I love it.